Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome back to the show. My name is Ashley, and I am so thankful you are here today. I will warn you about this episode. If you don't have the travel itch just yet, I can almost guarantee at the end of this episode, you're going to be wanting to travel because I have an incredible, amazing vegan world traveler on the show. Her name is Brighde, and she owns World Vegan Travel, which brings together vegans on these really spectacular trips around the world. She ensures that the vegan food on the trip is next to none. She also makes sure that everyone has enough treats throughout the day, and she always organizes this infamous trivia session during the final day party. She is a wealth of information when it comes to travel, and she shares 9 specific tips with us on how to travel as a plant-based eater, as a vegan, and some of the things that she mentioned, I was like, I had no idea they existed. And I feel like I've traveled a fair amount, and I'm always looking out for the best restaurants and how to make sure that everyone on the trip, whether it's just myself or I'm traveling with NB or somebody else, that we have a mapped out plan when it comes to the food that we're eating. But I'm telling you, Bridie just took it to a whole nother level. So I invite you to sit back, relax as she goes through these beautiful 9 tips on how to create a really successful vegan trip. So join me in welcoming Bridie to the show. Welcome to the show, Bridie.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's a pleasure.
Yes, I'm so thrilled for you to share your traveling wisdom as a vegan with our audience, with the listener. But before we get into all those great details, just would you mind just giving us a background on how you got into this?
Sure. So I actually own with my partner, we own a luxury vegan group tour company. So we take vegans to some amazing destinations around the world. And it was quite an interesting way that we got to this point. It's a bit of a long story, so I'll try to keep it pretty quick. But basically, I've always really loved traveling, and I actually met my partner, Seb. We were both tour leaders for another tour company. This was way back in like 2005, and I was vegetarian at that point. And we had been tour leading for this company called Intrepid, which maybe your listeners have heard of. And they run like small group adventures to different places. So, at that time, I was living out of a suitcase. I lived out of a suitcase for 5 years. And we loved it. And I actually met my partner. He was my trainee when we were running trips in Morocco, and we were opening up Morocco for Intrepid. And we met there, and we fell in love, and we decided that living on the road wasn't great for nurturing a relationship. So I had been living as a tour leader in Southeast Asia, in France, and Morocco as well. And we decided to move to Vietnam. About 3 years into my stay of Vietnam, I became vegan. I was greatly inspired by Colleen Patrick Goudreau and her podcast way back in 2009. And my partner became vegan very soon after that. And we actually became friends with Colleen Patrick Goudreau. She really plays a central role in all of this. And if anyone doesn't know her work, I really invite them to check it out. It was very, very inspiring to me. And Seb and I, we actually became really good friends with Colleen and her partner, her husband, David. And we started traveling with them. We both couples, we don't have children, so we really love to travel together. And over a glass of wine, Seb suggested, Colleen, why don't we take some of your people, your fans, your followers on a trip to Thailand? So Colleen said, sure, why not? Let's give it a try. And that really is where it all started. So to this day, we still run quite a few trips with Colleen, but we also have our own trips as well. For example, we're doing some Africa trips, like South Africa at Christmas time, and Botswana, and we're running more trips, places that Colleen's been to before, maybe not interested in going to again, or destinations that she's not so interested in. And really, that's how Well Vegan Travel came to be.
Wow, that is so neat. First of all, it's neat that you're vegetarian when you were in the traveling industry, and then you moved and became vegan, and then your partner actually followed, which is pretty impressive because some partners don't, or they're very resistant to it. So what a blessing that was, I'm sure.
It was. I mean, of course, you don't have to have your partner go vegan in order to be vegan, but I will say that I'm very, very grateful that he joined me on this journey for, all the reasons, for the animals, for his health, and for this ultimate dream business, this dream company that we have, where we get to take vegans to amazing places around the world and just enjoy that whole process. So yeah, it's kind of an amazing full circle kind of thing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, so Bridie, I'm curious how you even got into the travel industry to begin with, because I'm sure one doesn't think, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing. It's not a career path that I think a lot of people take. So how did that even
Mm-mm.
start?
Right. So, like I said, I've always really loved to travel. My mum, she was quite an inspiration to me. Obviously, by the time I came along, she'd settled down, but she spent all of her 20s. She's Australian. She lived in the UK in the 60s. A lot of Australians went over to the UK in the 60s, and she did some really rather adventurous travel. Like, she was going behind the Iron Curtain in the 60s, going throughout Russia and Eastern Europe, which, if you know much about the history back then, it was quite an interesting time. And she would just tell me all sorts of stories about how it was trying to get served in restaurants in Eastern Europe, and just the scrapes that she would get herself into. And obviously travel is very, very different now, but that really, really inspired me. I've always really loved learning languages and been interested. After graduation, I went and spent some time in France as a English language assistant in a French school. So travel has always been a really central part of my life. And then when I moved to Sydney in Australia in, gosh, when was it? 1999. That's right, just after my French assistantship finished. I was quite enjoying working in this school because I have an education background as well. And a colleague of mine, because that's an interesting thing. So one thing that I really like to do, I was living and working in a boarding school in downtown Sydney. And one of my things that I like to do was to organize travel excursions for the girls that were living in the boarding house. And maybe I had a knack for it, I don't know. But one of my colleagues pointed out an advertisement in the newspaper, as it was back then, saying, "Are you interested in tour leading in Southeast Asia?" And this just seemed like the most glamorous job. Not glamorous, I will say, but it seemed like the most exciting, glamorous job. And so I applied, and it was an all-day interview process. And I was absolutely floored when they offered me the job at the end of the day. And 1 month later, I was in Singapore, starting my first training trip, going from Singapore to Thailand. And yeah, I mean, like I said, it wasn't glamorous. It was incredibly long, hard hours, and working as a tour leader at that time was not particularly wonderfully paid, but I wouldn't swap it for anything. It really was such an incredible experience, and I got to meet amazing people, my fellow tour leaders, the local operators, got to see amazing things. It really was one of the best times in my life.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like it. It sounds like it was in your blood to begin with, and then your passion just grew the more you got into it. So, yeah.
That's right.
All right, Bridie. So let's get into these 9 tips because I know a lot of listeners, they're starting to travel more or they're just having that itch for travel because they haven't traveled in a really long time. So, what kind of tips do you have for especially people who are plant-based or vegan who are wanting to travel?
Yeah, yeah. So I have 9 tips for vegan travel, and some of them are kind of like there are so many tips, but I've tried to sort of condense them into these 9 tips for you. And you don't have to do all of them. Like these, I guess, if you really wanted to seek out the absolutely best vegan food in a place and you're prepared to put the work in to do that, then of course you'll probably want to incorporate a lot of these tips. But I don't want you to think that you have to follow all of these tips if you want to travel, otherwise you're going to starve. So I really want that to be clear, because honestly, I've traveled in so many places in really remote areas in Vietnam, and I literally have never ever had to miss a meal. So my first tip is to really adjust your mindset, because very much the way we experience something depends on our mindset in the beginning. So if you look at everything, if you look at the world, and this is the same for our everyday life, whether we're traveling or not, if you look, and these are Colleen's words actually, if you look through a lens of abundance, then that is what you will see. But if you look through a lens of lack, like, oh my goodness, I can't eat anything here, this is just terrible, then that is what you will see. So really just how you look at what your environment and what you're seeing, and your attitude, your response to that is really going to, have a huge part in how you see things and what your experience will be. And this is, I think, really important for vegans and non-vegans, actually. Like, you have to accept that, sometimes you're going to have amazing food experience and sometimes you won't. I mean, everyone who's listening to this who is not yet vegan will have had a bad food experience at some point in their travels. That's just the way it is, and that happens to vegans as well. So we can't always have great food experience. I mean, I think it's so funny because these days, every restaurant we can do a ton of research in. We can look at reviews and ratings and get recommendations. So I think that risk of having a bad food experience is much less than it was, maybe 15 years ago. But generally speaking, just accept and try not to be too disappointed when you have a bad food experience. So that's my first tip, keeping your mindset in check.
I like that. In fact, it reminds me when I was traveling to Florida a few weeks ago, I was on an island where it was basically fried seafood and cheap beer. And so eating out really wasn't an option. And so, similar to what you were saying, I had to look through that lens of I'm okay with going to the grocery store, eating simple meals because, the grocery store didn't have a whole lot of options, and being okay with that. So I really like that tip. And you're right, it can apply to so many more things than just your food, which I also really appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't know this place that you're referring to, but it sounds like it doesn't have a particularly diverse and incredible food scene anyway. So
Right.
it's not like you're really missing out on that, right?
Right. Exactly. Very true. Yep. Yeah.
All right, my second tip is to use apps and specific sites to help you. Now, I'm sure many of your listeners know about Happy Cow. It's amazing. Many people know about it. I'm not going to talk about that one too much because so many people know about it. It's amazing. But it's not the only one. And a lot of people just default to that without sort of playing around with other sites. So I have a couple of others to recommend to you. My first is for listeners to ask themselves, maybe there are some sort of country-specific apps or sites within that country. So an example that I always bring to the front is France. They have an amazing website called Veggie Resto. Most English speakers don't know about it. It's very, very similar to Happy Cow, except it's in French for French people. Now, does it mean you have to speak French fluently in order to use it? Absolutely not. It's incredibly visual. You can see the star ratings, you can see the address, you can see the photos. And what I really like about these alternatives to Happy Cow is a lot of people don't realize, and unless, if Happy Cow has changed their policy recently, then I will take my words back. But they are very specific about the kinds of restaurants that are listed on their site. For example, if there are an abundance of vegan restaurants in an area, they will limit the number of veg-friendly listings that can be on there. And I understand why they do that. It makes sense. And they'll also look at the veg-friendly menus of places that want to get listed on there and actually see, well, is it a decent enough vegan options in order for us to list on the site? So that's, of course, I respect Happy Cow for doing that. Otherwise, they would just have the hugest database of all time. But Veggie Resto, for example, doesn't have those limitations. So you might find things on there that you might not find on Happy Cow. My next site is this one called Veggie Hotels. And Veggie Hotels is as you can imagine, a site which lists all of the vegan and very vegan friendly hotels around the world.
Ooh.
So, if you're going to a place, it might be worth looking up there and seeing whether there is a vegan or very vegan friendly hotel close by to you, and you might like to choose that, or you might like to go and dine there. A lot of these hotels, they have dining. You don't have to stay there for dining. And it would be lovely if there were vegan hotels in every single destination around the world, but we aren't quite there yet. And some of these vegan hotels or bed and breakfasts or guest houses or whatever it is, they're often in places that are a little bit off the beaten track, and they often have restaurants attached to it. So for example, if you look at France, a place that isn't particularly vegan friendly, if you go outside of the big cities, if you really like the look of this particular hotel, it's probably going to be off the beaten track, and you'll probably discover a new area that you never would have gone to anyway. So I think this is really, really great. I just wrote a article for Global Vegan Magazine, and I just was doing some research into all of these vegan hotels and bed and breakfasts. And there are some amazing places. Like, for example, did you know that there is a vegan surf camp in the surfing area of France, on the southwest coast of France?
What?
And it's so cool. It's so amazing.
Oh my
You can go and
goodness.
learn to surf for the week and stay in and have the most amazing meals. And it might not be for everybody, but how incredible that there is that option out there.
Yeah.
And that is on Veggie Hotels, and also in the article that I wrote. So go and check that out.
Wow, I'm
I
going
have
to. Sorry.
No worries. My next one is Veg Visits. Now, maybe some listeners know about Veg Visits. Veg Visits is operated by some friends of mine. Actually, I did a podcast interview with them. And Veg Visits is like the Airbnb for vegans. So it's kind of really like how Airbnb was like 10 years ago, before all of the hosts had to be really, really competitive and basically just be perfect in order to get visitors. So when you go on Veg Visits, you can expect your normal people renting out their spare room, for example. What I really love about this is, depending on the host, you might have somebody that's going to give you recommendations, someone that you can maybe go out to dinner with. And obviously, you're going to be paying, and you're going to be supporting a vegan-owned business, Veg Visits, and you're going to be giving your money to a vegan person as well. So that's a really nice thing to do. So I really love this platform. They have some really quite unique accommodations, not as diverse and unique as Airbnb, but it's still pretty cool. Now, my last site and recommendation is A Billion. Have you heard of A Billion, Ashley?
You know what? I feel like I have, but you're gonna have to tell me what it is, because I don't remember.
Yeah, it's an interesting app. It is Singaporean, and it is really difficult to explain, so I'll try my best. But basically, like, it's an app for all things vegan. So they have reviews of vegan products in there. They have reviews of vegan restaurants in there. So it's very much like that. But they even go down to the level of vegan dishes. So you can search for vegan dishes around you as well. So rather than specific restaurants, it will highlight dishes. Now, something that's really interesting that A Billion does is, for every review that the user creates, $1 is donated to a charity, and they have a list of charities, organizations, sanctuaries that you can basically choose where your money goes to. So if you go to 20 places, or if you review 20 things, you can donate $20 to a sanctuary. It's interesting, the model, how they do it, but it's really cool. I've spoken with the founders at length several times, and it's really, really awesome.
Yeah, that
So
sounds really
definitely
awesome.
check that out. It also has like a bit of a social media vibe. The community is a little bit more enhanced than maybe Happy Cow is. So it's definitely worth checking out and throwing a few reviews on there to help the animals, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
My third tip is to consider packing some supplies or tools in your luggage. So this can be a lot of things. This can be just a few things. So for example, if you're going and doing a self-catering holiday, or you're going to a place where maybe you won't have a lot of vegan options, you might decide to put an Instant Pot in the back of the car. Some people even pack them in to go on flights. I would not do that, but some people might. And these are really great because, of course, it's all run by electricity. Even if we don't have a stove in the room that we're staying, we can often use an Instant Pot. A blender is a really great one to pack as well. There's all of these little instant blenders as well. Whenever Seba and I travel, we always pack some small collapsible Tupperwares. You can buy these Tupperwares that are collapsible, and I really like these for a number of reasons. Seba and I will often make ourselves sandwiches when we're going around Europe. We'll pack a sandwich we'll make a sandwich so that we can enjoy it in a park, or sometimes when we are trekking in the Alps as well. And we'll take maybe some vegan cheeses and some vegan deli slices, for example. And, it's just really nice to keep them in a Tupperware as well, so that they don't sort of get congealed and gross in the back of your pack. And then I'll often just, put them in the hotel fridge when I get there, or I'll ask the hotel if they wouldn't mind putting it in the fridge. And some won't be agreeable to that, but some will. I always pack like a little cool bag with some frozen bricks as well. And the main reason that I do this is so that I can bring home refrigerated vegan treats. Now, if I'm going to Europe, they have so many fun products that I can't get in North America. Most amazing bries, or fondue is the one that we always bring back.
Ooh.
So I really like to have like a little cool bag and some frozen bricks, and for bringing food back, and if I can as well, transporting stuff around on a hot day as well. I always like to pack a carton of shelf stable non-dairy milk. I prefer soy milk, that's my preference. And tea towels come in handy so much. And if you're doing a long trip, you can just throw them in the wash in the laundromat as well. And maybe some healthy snacks as well. So these are my supplies and tools. That's my third tip.
I love that. The collapsible, what a great idea, because if you put things in baggies, even the reusable baggies, they kind of get smashed or smushed or congealed, like you said. So I like the idea of
Mhm.
using a collapsible, like meal prep container. I think that's genius.
Yeah. And we have like a little, what we call the kitchen in a bag. It's just like a little, how when you go on a flight, a long distance flight, they'll give you a little bag with maybe a toothbrush and some socks in. It's just a small thing, just one like that. And in there, we'll put a sharp knife. Obviously, we'll check it in, and, a fork and a spoon, and just some basic things that just make preparation a little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
My fourth tip is, it doesn't really matter so much if you are on a short trip, but if you're on a long trip, if you're traveling for several weeks, then it's really worth trying to make a bit of an effort to stay a little bit healthy. I'm fine if I'm going to just be a little bit extravagant and just eating all the refined carbs if it's just for a few days. But after any longer than that, then I really, really want to eat a little bit more healthily, even if it's just for a meal. So I do have a few ideas for that. My first tip is to eat a plate of vegetables and fruits once a day. This is very easily done at breakfast in the hotel. They'll often have like lots and lots of fruit that you can eat, or if there's a big buffet, maybe some vegetables, salad. Just really try to stock up on a lot of fruits and vegetables at that time, because probably the rest of the day is not going to be so great. Another tip that I have, especially for longer term travel, is maybe packing like a greens powder or something like that. And these are quite popular now. They're very widely available, and just a way to get some nutrition, get some antioxidants in. And seaweed as well can be a really great way to do this. Now, I always like to do this when I am doing trekking. The destination that really springs to mind is trekking in Nepal. So I've been lucky enough to do lots of trekking in Nepal. And when you get up really, really high, most of the food is vegan. I will say there's not even a lot of non-vegan options up there, but I will say it's a lot of lentils. That's great. Poppadoms, brilliant. Tons of refined rice, but very few vegetables. And you can imagine it's very difficult to transport vegetables up there. And malnutrition for the people that live up there is really quite an issue. You know, when we go up there for just a few days, they're up there the whole time. So they don't have a lot of vegetables either, which is, you know, very, very sad and a cause of malnutrition up there. But, you know, something that we can do to help us in similar kinds of situations is the green powders, is eating seaweeds and freeze-dried vegetable snacks. You know, these I think they're freeze-dried. They've got a tiny amount of oil and they're very, very crunchy. Do you know the ones that I'm referring to?
I do. Uh-huh. Yeah, there's freeze-dried fruits and vegetables, which is really convenient.
Exactly. They're so light, you know, okay, by the time you've dragged them up the hills in
Yeah.
Nepal, they might be like a powder or very crumpled up, but you know, it doesn't matter. It's all good. And my other tip is, you know, if I'm going to be on a holiday and I am not going to be excited by an apple, I will say. So I really invite people to buy delicious fruits and vegetables. So some examples of these are like cherries in season in France, cherry tomatoes in the south of Italy, where you can just pop them in your mouth like candy, and, you know, the sweetest pineapples in Thailand, which you can buy off the street. So, you know, make sure that you're heading out and getting plenty of those. So those are my tips for staying healthy while you're traveling.
I like that. I think those are great ideas.
Fantastic. Okay. My next tip is kind of optional. You don't have to do it, but is to get excited and prepared ahead of time. And there are a number of ways that you can do this. Of course, we have the internet at our disposal. There's incredible YouTube, you know, 10 tips for successful vegan travel in Paris, or 10 amazing restaurants in Paris. There's so much. There's also travel guides that have been written by vegan bloggers, and these are often really updated, and, you know, in order for them to perform highly on Google, they're often updated constantly to make sure the information is the best and the most relevant. And I invite people to go and research these places, go onto Happy Cow, go and find the places that you really want to go check out, and to star them on Google Maps. I don't think many people know that they can do this, but when you choose a restaurant in Google Maps, you have the option to star it, or they even have other little icons as well, like heart a place that I loved, or you know, you can, if you want to, you can get really into categorizing them. But if you star all of the places that you want to go check out, those stars will stay on the map no matter what you're looking at in Google Maps. So if you buy the Louvre Museum in Paris, for example, you're there and you're thinking, okay, I wonder if there's any places that I really wanted to go to close by. You've got your stars and you can just see at a glance, okay, wow, this place that I obviously spent quite a bit of time looking at, so much so that I started it, it's just down the street. I'll go head there. So these are things that are wonderful. And also, it's not just restaurants as well. There are also a huge amount of vegan experiences as well. So I actually wrote a blog post about this. There's a lot of vegan city food tours these days as well. There are some in North America, but not as many as there are in Europe. There are actually a lot of vegan food tour experiences in Europe as well. So you never know. Often if you look at Airbnb, they have a whole experiences section these days as well. And you can have a look and just see, you know, maybe there's a vegan cooking class there. Maybe there's a vegan food tour, these kinds of things. And you can have a really fun experience. And a lot of the time on Airbnb, there are people that, you know, maybe aren't so serious yet that they have a whole website and this is their full-time job. They just kind of do it for fun. So you can find some people doing really amazing things there.
Yeah. I actually did, Brighde, I did a vegan food tour in Amsterdam, and it was such a great way to have someone kind of help us tour the city, try different restaurants. And then from there, I was like, oh, if we really liked this restaurant, we can go back for dinner or, go back on at another time. So I highly recommend that as well. I think that's such a great way to not only see the city, but try some really delicious vegan food.
I agree. I think that's so much fun. And what I really love is often the tour guide will just have worked with the restaurant to create these little taster plates. So that's how come you can go to like 4 or 5 different restaurants in the space of like 2 hours.
Yes,
It's so much fun.
it is. I agree. Yep.
All right. My next tip is to let the accommodation that you are going to stay in know of your preferences ahead of time. Now, I sometimes do this and I sometimes don't. It really depends on how long I'm staying in the place and how many meals I'm expecting to stay there. So, for example, if I'm in Paris, a place with amazing vegan restaurants that I definitely want to check out, and breakfast is not included, then I'm probably not going to bother having a conversation with them. I'm just probably not going to bother. But if I'm at a beachside resort where I'm going to be, and it's fully inclusive, for example, that will definitely be a situation where I will let them know in advance. So my approach to this is I'll usually send them an email at booking and I'll say something along the lines of, I'm vegan. I really, really am so excited about coming to stay at your hotel. I've heard great things. Will you be able to accommodate me? Will you have some non-dairy milk so I can have my coffee in the morning? All of these things. And sometimes, depending on how eager I am, I might ask to be forwarded to the food and beverage manager and having a conversation, get to know them a little bit. And when I arrive, I'll often ask to say hi to the food and beverage manager, how excited I am to be with them, just try to build that rapport. And then over the course of the week, give really helpful feedback to them, and their level of effort that they will go to will probably be proportionate to the amount of cost of the hotel. Of course, I understand that too, but if there's a really great meal, I will make sure I tell them so. And if things could be a little bit better, then I will kindly tell them that too. And if you have had a great experience, then tell other people and write reviews. They will really love that so much. And really be thoughtful about whether a negative review is going to help them want to cater to vegans in future. So if things really didn't go well, then at the end of your stay, depends on how you feel about this. Maybe you're on holiday, you don't want to be bothered with this, but maybe you could have a sit down meeting with this food and beverage person and say, this, it was okay, but I would invite you to consider these, and offer to give some tips and tricks. And I've had some really amazing experiences with this. Very often I've ended up like personally coaching them and helping them out, try to improve their vegan options. I like doing that kind of thing. It's not for everyone, but really be thoughtful before you blast them on reviews, because they're so dependent on reviews, and giving them a chance to make things right is helpful.
Yeah.
All right. My 7th tip is to learn or have access to a little bit of the language in the place that you are going to. Now, of course, we can't be expected to become fluent in Luxembourgish if we're going to Luxembourg, but certainly you can learn or have access to a little bit of the language. So there are a few ways that I invite people to do this. The first thing is Google Translate. Now, I know a lot of people know that Google Translate exists, but there are some things that maybe people don't know about. The first is you can actually download a language onto Google Translate. So it's always there. So it doesn't matter whether you have internet or not. If you are going somewhere really off the grid, then you will have perfect Google Translate, even if you don't have internet. And then one thing that you can do is you can put in some important phrases that you think you'll be using a lot, and you can star those phrases as well. So you're not having to type them in all the time. They also have a thing where you can actually say, like a microphone, so you can actually say something into your phone. So for example, are you sure there's no fish sauce in this? For example, you can say that into your phone, and it will then say it in the language to the person that you're speaking to. And they even have a conversation function as well, which is really cool. They also have a thing called Google Lens, which has been incorporated into Google Translate as well. And basically what you do, you put your phone, or you can also take a photo as well, over, for example, a menu or some ingredients list, and it will actually translate that on your screen in front of your eyes. It's very much like Harry Potter.
Yes.
It really does look like Harry Potter. And I will say it's not the best translation, of course, but it does surprise me, and that is able to really translate some very funky fonts. Like, it kind of surprises me in that way. So this is really kind of a cool thing to use on menus as well. And so definitely do that. And something that you can also do is I actually have on my website an editable PDF guide. So it's got like a list of phrases that you might need in English. And then you just go onto Google Translate, you copy and paste that phrase. For example, thank you, chef, so much. Please thank the chef so much for accommodating me. This was delicious. We really appreciate it. You copy and paste that into Google Translate. You copy and paste the target language back into the editable Google Doc. I mean, you don't have to use my document. You can do this yourself as well. And you print out the final document. You just keep it in your purse, and then you can just point. So these are some ways that you can be just super, super polite, ask things really nicely, not be frantically doing it on your phone, and just have everything on your phone. So this is really fun too. And another tip is, why not learn some of the language? Why not learn some of the language? And there are so many amazing ways that you can do that. I have a podcast on episode where I talk with Wendy Wernerth, who is an incredible polyglot. She's absolutely amazing, and also a vegan travel blogger. And I also like learning languages. And we talk about all sorts of amazing ways, apart from Duolingo, which is good in itself, but you know, there's also italki for private lessons with teachers. And you know, why not have a couple of hours just going through some important phrases and making sure that the pronunciation is correct in some ways that you might endear yourself with your host country and the people that live there. And it's a lot of fun being able to speak a little bit of the language. So that's my 7th tip.
I like that. It's a lot of fun. And I think there's just a lot of appreciation on the flip side of the person in the country when you're making an effort. I think that goes over a long way as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
My 8th tip, and we're getting to the end, but my 8th tip is to use social media, because all of the things that I mentioned really aren't social media, but social media is another huge way that you can really enhance your vegan vacation. And one way it was actually my friend Eunice Reyes from V-Rated Vegan Food. She has a really great Instagram account and YouTube channel. She's a dear friend. And what she does, because she is all about looking for the best food, she does like extensive research ahead of time. And one of her favorite things is to search hashtag vegan destination. So for example, hashtag vegan Valencia. Now, a lot of the local people that live in Valencia, for example, that will be the hashtag that they will use: vegan Bangkok, vegan Cape Town. And you will often find some really, really cool special thing there. She swears by this as a really great way to find fun eats. And also another way is to use local Facebook groups as well. There's often, you know, if you just search for vegan Bangkok or vegan Thailand on Facebook, for example, and then you go to groups, you'll see a ton of groups come up there. I really invite people to use the search function before asking really obvious questions like what vegan restaurants are there. But I really enjoy using the Facebook groups to ask very, very specific questions. For example, if there's an animal experience that I'm looking to have in a country, Thailand comes to mind because they have a lot of elephant experiences, and it can be a little bit tricky to really know whether it is actually a sanctuary or not. So if I've found a place that I think looks kind of interesting, I'll ask that vegan community, I really want to go here, but what have you heard? Is it legit? And they will probably know or have some sort of insight. So that is an example. Often there will be a lot of vegan events that are happening that are hosted on Facebook groups or on meetups.com. And this can be a really great way to find out if there is maybe. So for example, where I live, there is a meetup group for vegans, and they're doing all sorts of really cool things. They're doing like hiking, followed by lunch afterwards. I mean, really cool thing. What a great way to meet local vegans. So
Yeah.
this can be a really fun thing as well.
I like that. Yeah, something that you can do when you're traveling, and even something for you listening, and even myself, I'm talking to myself, something you can do locally as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can have this amazing vegan community. Like, I'm just blown away by how many events there are doing some really, really fun things, going to places that I've never been to, even in my
Yeah.
local area.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
My last tip is, why not use vegan travel professionals? It might be surprising to some people, but there are actually vegan travel professionals out there who will organize travel for you. So obviously there are people like me, World Vegan Travel, we organize group tours in the luxury niche, but there are plenty of vegan tour companies that offer sort of more cultural, more homestay kind of things in Asia. Maybe that's your thing. There's also vegan travel agents as well. So you can contact a vegan travel agent, and they will often be able to suggest particular cruise lines that are very vegan friendly, or vegan resorts. If you've got a family, for example, maybe they'll know some very specifically vegan friendly resorts that you might like to check out. And this might not be so important for everybody, but for example, they will know if there's any, like off the top of my head, some dolphin shows, for example, at the hotel. Sometimes this can happen at big resorts, and they'll probably say, oh, you don't want to do that. And very often your travel agent has a little bit more sway than as an individual has. So they might be able to sort of say, look, can you make sure that this guest doesn't have feather pillows? Maybe that's important to some people. It's important to me. Maybe they'll be able to have a little bit sway than maybe you might have to, particularly when you're looking at like a very, very big resort. And yeah, I mean, there's something to be said with traveling with other vegans as well, with a group tour. And when somebody else is doing all of that work, you don't have to do all of the things that I just mentioned above, because somebody is doing that for you. And maybe you have the time and the inclination and the passion to do all of those things that I just said to you, and maybe you just want to book the trip and not worry about anything else, and in which case it's a great idea to pay a travel professional to do it for you. Oh, those are all of my tips, Ashley.
Brighde, I love them. Every single one of them. There was something valuable in there that I feel like all of us could take away on our next travel trip. And I think it's great too, just the fact that, vegan traveling is becoming more and more popular, and people like yourself are becoming, more popular. People are getting to know about you more. That way, if they don't want to put all that time and energy into planning a trip and, booking every single step, then you can do that for them,
Yeah.
which is kind of nice.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you get lots of surprises as well. And you just book it, you just turn up, and you
I know.
just go with the flow and just let the day take you. And we like to surprise all of our guests with some really, really special things that they never would have been able to do by themselves, that they never
Yeah.
would have, that wasn't even on the itinerary. And, you know, surprises when you get to be an adult are often really upsetting. We try to have nice surprises that are actually
Yes.
really, really lovely.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Well, as much as we can, we're going to list as many of these resources as possible that you listed in the show notes below. So if you're curious to check out some of the things that Brighde touched on, definitely click below and explore some of those. But Brighde, if someone's curious to maybe book a vacation or just curious to learn more about you and what you do, what are some of the best places that they could connect with you?
Of course, of course. Well, we're Well Vegan Travel on all of the social media handles, but um, uh, it's very hard to get our audience to actually see the posts that we do due to algorithms. So I really, really invite people to go and sign up to our mailing list, and that way you have the control as to whether you open the email or not. And we'll help you get to know us a little bit. We also have a podcast as well called the Well Vegan Travel Podcast, where we share lots of even more vegan travel tips and things like that. But the great thing about being on our mailing list is that you are the first to learn about our trips before they even go live on the website, so you kind of get like first dibs on them. So it's a great way to get excited about travel and learn about the trips that we have coming up, to sign up to be notified first of trips, all sorts of wonderful things. That's what happens when you sign up to our mailing list, and you get some lovely free guides to vegan travel to help you get ready for travel, and that editable PDF that I talked about, as well as packing lists as well. So head on over to wellvegantravel.com and sign up for the mailing list. That's the best way.
Wonderful. Oh, I love that so much. And it sounds like, I mean, if it's anything like you just told us, value-wise, there's going to be so much value just added with the emails and just the content that you provide. So thank you so much, Brighde, for doing all of that.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show, and we really, really appreciate your travel tips.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we will catch you next time. Until next time, keep thriving.